Welcome to the SelfActualize Podcast, where we bring you insights from world-class coaches on personal growth and self-discovery. I'm Bakshi, and in this series, we're featuring Dr. Colleen Campbell, the founder of Ignite Potential. She'll be guiding us through the powerful process of discovering your true self, understanding the stories about who you are, and how to reframe them to align with your authentic self. Let's get started.
Hey everyone, welcome to the SelfActualize Podcast, where we bring you world-class coaches sharing the insights on subjects that they're absolute experts in. I'm your host, Anmol, and I'm joined today by my co-host, Amit Bakshi. Amit is also the founder and CEO of SelfActualize.ai, which is, of course, the leader in AI-powered coaching. Amit, how are you doing today?
Doing well, thanks. How about you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. All right. So today we're thrilled to welcome an old friend of ours. It's Dr. Colleen Campbell. She's a clinical psychologist. She's an executive coach, and she's the founder of Ignite Your Potential, which is a coaching center dedicated to helping individuals and teams achieve transformative growth. She's got over 16 years of experience in career, executive, and life coaching. So Dr. Campbell has empowered countless individuals to overcome challenges, navigate transitions, and discover fulfilling paths in their personal and professional lives. So Colleen's work is rooted in her expertise in psychology, which she combines with her passion for helping people unlock their potential. Her center, Ignite Your Potential, has served clients across industries and life stages with services ranging from corporate coaching to resume strategy. She's also an advisor for SelfActualize.ai, and she's contributing her expertise to shaping the future of AI-powered coaching. Okay, so with all of that, we're excited to explore Dr. Campbell's journey, her approach to coaching, her thoughts on the intersection of psychology, leadership, and AI. So with that, let's get started. So Colleen, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to see you again, and thanks for being on the podcast with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's get into it. So Colleen, tell us a little bit about your journey and your journey into coaching. Obviously, you've got a background in clinical psychology. You founded Ignite Your Potential back in 2008. So what inspired you to transition from the clinical psychology, the psychotherapy side to coaching? How did you make that decision? How did you make that transition? What inspired you to make that transition? And how has that journey really shaped your perspective?
Yeah, thank you. You know, first, even before that, when I decided to go into psychology, I think the root of that decision is the root of both of those career paths. And really, it's about, I had an aha moment many years ago when I was reading The Road Less Traveled by Scott Peck. And, you know, in my background, I come from a loving family, but there's some dysfunction there. And when I was younger, I was having real challenges with trying to figure out my path, even trying to develop coping mechanisms and trying to find my way when I was feeling a bit lost. And when reading that book, had this aha moment around if I could find my own way and learn everything I could about potential, about change, then I could help other people. And it was it was a deep moment for me because it fueled then, like, I think it gave me meaning and reason to go on the journey that I went on and to help myself. And then the idea that I could help other people. And that went into getting a doctorate in clinical psychology. My background in psychology is very strengths-based rather than pathological. You know, rather than being interested in, you know, what goes wrong, I've always been interested in what does it look like when people are thriving and human potential, really. And then I always presumed I would be a psychologist. I worked in that way. And at the same time, I am very fascinated by change, what gets in the way neurologically. You know, we can change. Our brains are plastic. It's so exciting. And yet the majority of people will never make significant changes in their life. So why is that? And so that's been an interest of mine. And I did study that when I was getting my doctorate. But I started thinking about a coaching application and how there could this could really be an important element for coaching. So then I explored it, studied coaching, and when I pivoted, then I moved into executive career and life coaching. My expertise is in helping people find their next right career move. And executive coaching, I think of as what's going on in your current career now. And so we do corporate work that way. But really, it was that desire to understand change even more and the application of it. And, it's worth mentioning that with coaching, there's a sense that it's action oriented. You're setting goals and you're moving toward it. With therapy, of course, change is happening, but this is a bit more like letting your psyche guide. You might walk in, you want to feel better, but you're not sure how you're going to get there. And sometimes you're not even sure the journey that you're on. And then in the end, you're feeling better because you've learned more about yourself emotionally. Whereas coaching can be much more directive in the sense like, I want to achieve this goal. What's getting in the way? How can I set some goals? What can I learn about myself to get myself there? So that's really been a fascination of mine and really what drew me to do coaching with people.
Wow.
And it's been
Wow.
a great choice.
Yeah. So that's fascinating. So really it was, the book that you read, and then that really inspired you to get deeper into this whole idea of transformation and change, right? How does that transformation take place? And then you explored it initially through the clinical psychology, and then you
That's
feel
right.
as if the coaching, the career coaching, maybe takes it to a next level or scratches an itch. Because again, like you said, with coaching, you could focus it on strengths and be a little bit more direct in it, which maybe you weren't able to as much when you were doing the psychology bit.
Well, yes and no, in the sense that, so back when I was doing psychotherapy, I still focused on strengths. If I was working with someone with schizophrenia, instead of just focusing on that, I thought, well, who is this person and what are their strengths? And we would talk about that and use it as a foundation, like who are they? And that is still a part of my coaching today. At the same time, I think of coaching as a bit more action oriented. And even back when I did psychotherapy, as clients had insights, consistently, I would say, oh, that's so great. Let's make an action plan. Let's get mileage out of that.
Yeah.
But that's what started drawing me to coaching, because even though that's fine in therapy, it's much more of a coaching model of like, let's move this. How do we get you where you want to go? What are the goals that what are the milestones that you can set? So I think it's that action oriented element and watching the needle move,
Right.
and I think that's what coaching clients enjoy too. They want to get there, but something is blocking them. And so let's figure this out together and cover some ground,
Yeah, I mean, I think this whole idea of transformation, of personal transformation, it's so interesting and so fascinating. I think Amit and I have always been fascinated about this, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing the Self-Actualize, is because, and at least for me personally, even as a kid, I would watch these movies, like The Karate Kid or like Back to the Future or Star Wars, and I was fascinated by the hero's journey, and it follows a very specific theme. You have the hero who's not quite the hero yet. They encounter a problem, and then there's some sort of compelling event, and then there's a guide, and then there's a villain, and then at the end they've transformed into the hero, and you see this transformation take place. So those are always my favorite movies as a kid. And then I also read a lot of these biographies of the US presidents, and like one of my favorites was Abraham Lincoln. And again, I really like those, not necessarily from a historical perspective, but more from transformation perspective. Like Abraham Lincoln, how does he go from that poor lumberjack, basically, in the Kentucky wilderness to one of the greatest leaders and presidents the world has ever seen? Like, how does that transformation even happen? It's just so fascinating. And you're a change agent in that. You are directly helping people transform, and with coaching, being very direct and intentional about it.
Yep. Yeah. And I think there is an element. It's interesting because my graduate school spoke to this and felt like it was quite important. But I feel this way all through coaching, that I would never expect someone to do or go through something I haven't myself, wanting to be like I think most of us who do this kind of work are doing it personally, as well as if we're coaching people, we're getting coached. If we are being there, walking with someone, while they're going through these changes, we're doing that same work. We know how challenging it can be at times. Sometimes right before transformation, there's crisis, like you were alluding to in the hero's journey. It's not always what we expect. It can be really humbling. That transformation can be a breakdown in the beginning, right? And then, but yeah, I think it's a really exciting piece. And then I also get curious about what can't change. Like we have a brain, we have personalities and certain structures. So we know that, for example, that it's not the best use of our time to strengthen our weaknesses. It's just not, so learning about ourselves, understanding, okay, this part of me is pretty fixed. What can I do around that? Or what can I leverage? Yeah, it's exciting and really meaningful work.
Yeah, no, that's great.
For
And then
sure.
that kind of leads to my next question is on more of the philosophy side. So your specific coaching philosophy, this whole idea of helping clients kind of through that pain that you talked about, and your philosophy is really being an advocate for your clients, right? So holding a client's vision even when they feel shaken. Then you talk about this a lot. For instance, you're especially this day and age with all the things that everyone is going through with post-COVID and everything, you're helping people after they've been fired or after they've been laid off or after one of these compelling events in their life. Can you elaborate on how you create that safe space for your clients and inspiring them after to grow and overcome these kind of challenges?
Sure. And, and that philosophy, just briefly, I'll share. I mean, for me, it comes all the way back to a humanist kind of existential philosophy. You see that coaching sort of adopted that and had also, most coaches have this very client-centered approach. The client has all the answers, like their inner resources are what we're trying to tap together, what they're doing. It's not something I'm going to do for them. And that's so important, and customizing the work to each client and, really listening and really understanding. Sometimes it's in words, but sometimes it's even in their body language. Like when someone's energized, or if someone's telling you about a goal, but it feels like not energizing at all. Yeah. And so, that client-centered focus comes from humanist psychology and philosophy. And it's, I think, so important. When you asked me that, though, about like these crisis moments and how I might like approach having them feel safe. I mean, I think it starts at the very beginning with, and this comes from psychology, with creating a container. And a container is created in so many ways. It's really about building trust, even doing what you say you're going to do. If I'm sending homework, I'm sending homework. I'm not forgetting to do that. If we set a goal in a session and I say, oh, would you like me to check in with you about that? I check in with them about it. These types of things just create safety and create a container. And so that's really important. But I think also active listening, if you're sharing something and I'm reflecting, it feels good to know that someone is really hearing you and tracking. And then being an advocate of someone. When someone's fired, I mean, I think, or something like that, they lose their job or they're mistreated in some way. I mean, sometimes it can seem like our worst fears manifested. And so to be able to digest that, like sometimes we need to take some time and talk about the story. And then what starts to happen is the story transforms. So by the time they're job searching, they are not telling that story the same way anymore. They have a more empowered version of the story that they can walk forward with. Yeah.
And when something like that happens, the other feeling that's hard to deal with is you feel very alone.
Yeah.
You feel very
ashamed.
alone. Ashamed.
Yeah. Absolutely. It could create imposter syndrome. Absolutely. But this is something that, we all go through. And I think that's the hidden thing about challenges, when we are going through something difficult with a child, when, in parenting or in a marriage or, in a job, it can feel like, oh, like we're alone. It's just happening to you. But it's like we need these experiences to become who we are. They're actually a gift in disguise. I mean, I say that delicately because some things we go through are horrific, But it makes us, sometimes we, there's no one I know that's healthy and whole, who's in their 60s, who doesn't feel humbled by life. That's actually an important piece, of developing into a wise elder, And so, yeah, to be able to, and I think people feel that if you've been through it, if I'm talking to you and I'm telling you about a problem, I can feel that you have had your own challenges and you face them.
You can feel it.
Right. Because it's not like you're like, oh, well, look at the bright side. It's like,
Right.
no, this is part of life, and we can walk through this together. But it's an honor to walk through some of the most challenging moments of people's lives to help them get to another place. Yeah.
Especially when you are ambitious and you do have goals and you're going after stuff. When you go after hard stuff, you're going to fall.
Yes.
You're going to fall and you're going to have failures and you're going to get fired or laid off. Like those things are going to happen more when you're ambitious and you're actually going after stuff. So that's part of the gift and the curse of it also.
That's well put, Anmol. It really is, right? Like expect it.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it's like, what does it all mean? Well, it means that you're going after hard things.
Right. And
it doesn't mean that you're a failure.
Than done. Yeah, it's easier said than done. But it's like that Denzel Washington has that commencement speech that he does where he's like, you've got the tools to be successful, but do you have the guts to fail? So go out there and just fail, like almost look for failure. And the more you're failing, that probably means the more you're trying. And if you're not failing, then you're not trying. Kind of that whole, there is no failure. Like if you went after it, good or bad, just the idea that you went after it, that's a success. That's a victory.
Yeah.
But it's just hard to, easier said than done. But if you can really like embody that approach, I think that's powerful.
Yeah. And I think what we're speaking of is, how do we build resiliency? And it's through making meaning. Like if this thing you're going through where you feel like it's gutting you, actually, there's a time to grieve, to be sad, to, mourn something, but then eventually, this is an opportunity to deepen who we are. Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
really meaningful.
So Colleen, switching gears just a little bit. So I'm a client of yours as well. And so is Amit. But actually you were one of the very first life coaches or career coaches or executive coaches that I ever worked with. And when we started working together, where you had me run through these exercises. So you had me run through these several exercises to help me understand myself better, like my personality type, my strengths and weaknesses, my values. So, the Myers and the Briggs, the Clifton Strength Finders, and all of this was very, very useful for me to better understand me, better understand my goals and really where I want to go, but also to put in perspective where I've been in the past. Once I better understood what motivates me, what doesn't, what I'm looking for, I was able to put in better perspective. Oh, that's why I was kind of frustrated at that job 10 years ago, or that's why that thing didn't really work out. It wasn't really scratching the itch, or it didn't really fit with the values that you helped me understand. So that was like very critical for me. But is this a common approach that you use when working with new clients? And does this kind of come from your clinical psychology background? Where does that look deep into yourself first come from?
It does. Yeah, it does. When you study psychology at the doctorate level, you take a couple of classes and assessments. And actually, I'm certified in, 15 or more assessments to give to clients. But, I think it's important to narrow down and decide which key ones can really help us. So really, whatever I'm doing with most of my clients, maybe not all, but most of them, 99%, whether it's life coaching, relationship coaching, I do a lot of career coaching and executive coaching. Even though the goals might be the same, I do begin that way. And because I think it's like, at the Delphi Oracle, know thyself. I think it's just so important.
Yeah.
And even for people, most of my clients know themselves really well, but it gives us even more language to describe things about like our patterns and, why we do certain things, our motivations, even the way we look at the world. And the other thing about it that I like is not only are you learning about yourself, but it gives you a moment to reflect on how people are different. So if someone, if you're a fast mover, and a lot of people in the startup space are, I know, both of you can like take an idea, move it into action. It's awesome. And then if you run into someone who's more of a deliberator, if you didn't know any better, it could be irksome, as if they're thwarting you, right?
Right.
And when in fact, and if both people understand that one person likes to move fast, one person likes to move slower, they can actually collaborate better, and think, okay, we've come up with this plan. We should give it to so-and-so to have them deliberate over this, and you can work together instead of feeling like, why are they always slowing us down?
Right.
Or this other person thinking, why do they always want to move so quickly? We're going to make mistakes. And so it's really great to know ourselves, but then to understand, oh yeah, I like to look at the big picture, but my colleague is in the details, in the, pragmatic, and how can we both appreciate the differences and work together? So even if I'm working with one person, they then bring that out into the world with them. So yeah, I love those assessments, and I consider it also helps me understand what we can leverage as we're setting goals. And then if there are goals where I think, wow, they don't have certain strengths that would really be helpful, then we can talk about how do you collaborate with people who might have those? Who do you need to work with in order to have that recipe that's really going to work? Yeah, I think assessments are great and useful. And even, I've gone through these 100 times, but if I were making a huge decision, I would step back and look at those things about myself and think, how does that inform my decision? Your strengths tell you what you need to thrive. And so that's quite important.
So Colleen, as Anmol mentioned, I've been a longtime client of yours as well. So I know firsthand how you've impacted me. I'm curious to hear about one of your most proud coaching moments. Is there some transformation that really stands out in your career? I know, of course, I'm your all-time favorite client, right? But aside from me, is there anybody else, of course, don't mention who they are or anything, but anything that you can really think of that someone you truly transformed?
I will say that, and this has happened a number of times in the years that I've been coaching, that one of the most interesting things is when someone really, for whatever reason, be it that the way they were raised, sometimes we're raised by people who are very different from we are, and that can sometimes obscure elements of who we are, or some people are heavily influenced by their family, making even their career decisions based on their family's influence. So one thing that I found, first of all, really rewarding personally, but also to watch this, is when I meet someone who is in a career, and usually, hopefully at the beginning, because if you're in a career that doesn't fit you for a long time, it can be a recipe for pretty bad burnout. But there have been times where I'll meet someone who's really demoralized and drained and just hopeless. And then I'm getting to know them, and it's just like a fun, almost surprise to share with them. Like, I have some good news, like your personality is this way and your job is the exact opposite of that. So here you are feeling like you're not, you're working so hard to be average. Everybody you work with, you don't feel like they're your people. And some people will ascribe meaning to that there's something wrong with them. And so I can think of years ago, a young woman that I met who was an accountant, and her personality, and she was, as described, just feeling really down. She was good at math, was encouraged by her family to go into accounting because it's such a stable career. And accounting is a great career for the right person. But she was just feeling super drained. And she was an extrovert who was a big picture thinker, who was wonderful with people, read body language. None of that she's using in her career. But at first she's feeling, oh my God, like, I think she actually thought that I was just going to help her get better at that. And instead I had an answer, like I had something to share with her, I should say, that wasn't what she expected, which is, your personality is wonderful and you have all of these gifts you can share. It's just not what you were thinking. And so then we worked together. She actually eventually went and became a therapist.
Wow.
But I've had a lot of, I'd say probably once a year, I might have someone who has pigeonholed themselves so deeply in, and really takes responsibility for the fact that they're not having good outcomes. And so it's almost like an exciting thing to be able to say, it's not what you think, it's even better, you know?
That's
Yeah.
awesome to see that kind
Yeah.
of like completely shifting gears, right? Like because of what's something that you unlocked in them. So I thought it would be interesting to actually ask you a personal question, kind of like what I would ask you during a session. So this, I don't know how unique this is, but growing up, I would often shoot for the A minus, right? And it was just this bizarre thing where I would just do just enough work to get like an 89.5% in a class because it would round up to 90. And then that would technically be an A minus and that would technically be a 4.0, right? So, and somehow in doing that, I felt smart for doing that. Like I was gaming the system. Only like much later in life did I realize like I was just basically robbing myself. I was cheating myself, like from just working hard like normal people should. How unique is this? Is this something unique to me, or is that something that a lot of people have?
I think that certain people do that sort of thing. I mean, you know, I'm think my son does that. He's much younger, but and you know, but it makes me wonder. I can tell, like when you're talking about it, that you might have this judgment about it, as if, you know, it's almost like trying to get the easy way out. But let's notice you weren't going for a C. You know, you weren't
That's
like, maybe I'll
true.
just get a
Yeah.
B. It's interesting, right? And it doesn't, I mean, in other words, on one hand, if I'm looking at it as an individual, it's like, here you have a person who's shooting for the best, but just, it's like just good enough best, just squeaking through to still be on top. But it's almost like, I think about the way it works when you hit 90% and how much harder it is to get
Mm.
to 95 or 96. You know, the further we go, it's harder and harder. Is it really the best use of our time? Maybe it's not, but you know, that's just my perspective. In a coaching situation, it's about exploring what it means to you. And because I think there might be a question underneath that around, I wonder why I did that. And, you know, what's going on there? And was I selling myself short? It almost sounds like. But what do you think? I mean, in some way, it could be efficiency even, right? Like you're trying to be the most efficient so you have more time for other things that you're trying to do. Do you have some thoughts on what you were thinking at the time?
I think you're right. It's like diminishing returns. Like, is it
Yeah.
really worth if it's going to take 4 more hours? Would I rather just do what's going to take a half hour and go do something fun, right? That's how I was probably thinking as a kid. But I think there is some guilt there, right? Because
Yeah.
um it kind of reminds me like if I'm running, right? Like that one year when I was like really dialed in listening to David Goggins, he pushed me to just shoot for the A. There was no A minus
Yeah.
with David Goggins, right? But it kind of reminds me like on a normal day, I'll wake up and run a 5K or a 10K, but I won't be like running as fast as I should. Like, but
Uh-huh.
it's just kind of comfortable. I'd rather listen to an audiobook than like really push myself. But I also know, like my trainer Mars will tell me, "Hey, you're only going to make progress if you're actually pushing yourself," right? So
Uh-huh.
it's a balance. Like I can't run
Yeah.
at full speed every day, but I should once in a while.
Yeah. I like that. I mean, I like the balance, right? They, you know, I don't know about should, but but it's that if I throw that in the mix once in a while, that there can be a benefit from it. But at the same time, I do like the diminishing returns. It feels like a leadership perspective, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I
remember,
don't know.
remember burnout too. Like burnout, um, especially with people like us and kind of where we're at. You know, we've been working for 2 decades or more, and it's something that's one of the biggest problems that I think we have right now. And this whole idea of being like David Goggins and going with the A plus and always giving it the A plus effort. It's good, but you got to be careful with it a little bit because it can lead to that burnout. And
Mhm.
I kind of had the similar experience during the COVID. I was listening to the David Goggins books and I was like running hard. And I was at that time I was interviewing. I was with Dell and I'd been there for forever, like 10 years. I was looking to leave and I started interviewing again. And I was getting excited about all of these different interviews that I was doing. I was over preparing for these interviews. I was putting in hours and hours of prep and I had all these questions listed out. Then I would get into the interview and they wouldn't ask me any of the questions that I prepped for. So I would do all this
Yeah.
extra work for no reason. And then there was a level of burnout there after that. So I think balance is definitely key. And this idea of diminishing returns is very important. And then there's a
Yeah.
really good author out there, Greg McKeown, who writes about this. So
Hmm.
he's got a book, Essentialism, and he's also got another book, it's Essentialism, and then there's one more. But he talks a little bit about that, not necessarily like putting in the minimum, but working hard, but working in balance, which I think is
Mhm.
very important.
Yeah. And I think putting in the minimum to get the best results is a whole different equation than
Right.
literally putting in the minimum. But you bring up something that has been on my mind a bit. I know people who, even the way they raise their children, are putting them in situations where they're driven, whether it's highly competitive sports, doing sports before school in the morning, just constant. And they're training them. It's not about the sports. They're training them to be leaders.
Mhm.
I think it's great if and I know like all three of us know this, if you know how to sprint and really put it into high gear and go, that's essential to know how to do that. But I think also we have to listen to our bodies.
Mhm.
It's that kind of training. When I think about competitive sports, it's training you to go past your body saying, I think you and I were talking about this one day about, I believe we were, there's some speaker has said this, like some kind of sports person. I think they might even be like military, where like when your body is screaming stop, you're only 40% there.
Yeah.
Like
That's
you have
Goggins.
That's
40%.
Goggins.
Is it
Yeah.
okay? I love that. When you're in a moment, like if you're on a bike and you're climbing, it's like that's great to remind yourself, right? But on the other hand, I think it's like a tool in the toolbox, but there's something amazing about being able to do an event and not getting injured, because
Yeah.
one is, I did AIDS life cycle years ago. I'm thinking about doing it next year, and it's riding your bike from San Francisco to Los Angeles. And I felt proud at the end that I wasn't injured, like that I could listen. And there was this key moment where I had to stop and I made an adjustment to my riding. I'm so grateful I could tune in and not push past it, because I think there were times in my life I might have, just like,
Yeah.
and then that's not a win. So it is interesting what you're saying, Anmol, about the balance and how to use all of these tools. So maybe there's a time to
And I
think,
think, yeah, and
There's
I think
also like, so
listening,
I was just thinking that in a business setting, it's actually smart to just do what you need to. Like you have to be so time efficient, right? But I
right?
think maybe
yeah,
some of the guilt is because I was doing it like in an academic setting, right? In an academic setting, it's totally not okay to read the cliff notes or right. So anyways, let's shift gears a little bit. Did want to ask you, Colleen, about your work with SelfActualize, right? You've made such a
Mhm.
huge impact. Like you're the one person on our team that has been like a lens into the world of coaching. I've learned so much from you personally. You've informed our whole, like all our iterations. And so I was just curious,
Thank you.
where do you see AI transforming coaching, right? Like just taking a step back, even from SelfActualize, what do you think the opportunity could be?
Well, one of the fundamental pieces that I was excited about from the moment you told me about it, and continue to be just as excited, is that when it comes to change, one of the biggest elements is about remembering. Like we could make a plan.
Mhm.
I could tell you I'm going to do this thing 5 times a week or whatever. You could ask me coaching questions like, well, what do you think is going to get in your way? I could make contingency plans. But if I forget, I could leave the session. I'm saying, like, if I pretend you're my coach, I could leave the session and 3 days later forget all about it. It's a phenomena of our brain. Even when something is important to us, we might forget. We have well-worn pathways going in other directions. So how do we remember every single day? And so having an app with AI that can coach you, not just a reminder, but something that can be engaging you back into your goal, I think that's incredibly powerful. It basically, another way to put it is, this solves a problem that coaching, if I'm coaching someone once a week or every other week, I mean, we of course talk about how to scaffold, how to put things into place, whether it's, a sign on your mirror or a sign on your computer or alarms on your phone to go off. But that is very manual, to have something in your pocket that can be reminding you of your goals, of your why, keep it re-engaging you into that. That's what we need to stay on course to create an actual change process. They used to say, 21 days to make a habit. There's no basis in science for that. It's about 2 or 3 months. And then even after that, certain personalities, even 6 months later, will have what they call in science an extinction burst, where you like feel like stopping, where you're like, I'll just blow this off today. So to have that reminder, I love that. I think it's really exciting and makes the coaching more comprehensive.
That's what happens to me with meditation every year. At 6 months in, I get the extinction burst.
Yeah, the extinction burst. Yeah, it's a funny thing. And, it's almost a whole nother conversation around like why that could happen. And for some certain personalities, it happens more. But yeah, how to have accountability, daily. It's just awesome. And then of course it can help coaches scale, to help more clients, which is really exciting. Yeah.
So Colleen, what about your own personal growth resources? So obviously you mentioned the book earlier in the conversation that was super impactful for you.
Yeah.
What are some examples of others? I mean, obviously on this podcast, Amit and I are big readers, we're voracious readers, podcasts. What are some of those other books, podcasts, or other self-development tools that you would recommend, not only recommend, but also that have personally shaped your experience or your style?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many. I think most people who are passionate about this field are continuously reading, but you both know I really love Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
I think it's just a great classic, really useful. I'm a big fan. I mean, James Clear, even to follow him on some social media platform, he's on Instagram and others and on LinkedIn, because every day you're getting snippets of his book. I really like Brene Brown and the work she did with vulnerability. I think it's almost what we were talking about with the hero's journey before, and knowing like you're not alone, like this is part of being human. So I'm a huge fan of Brene Brown. And, of course, there's classics like Oprah. And the reason she's classic is, it's this idea of being a leader, but a champion of people. So many different people who are, I'll be transparent though. I don't listen to a lot of podcasts. I think part of it is I don't have a commute at this point, and that's exactly when I would listen to them. But I think it's so great that you're asking this question, and it would be wonderful even to have a list. Maybe we can put that together and have it on the site, because there's so many people producing some really great content out there.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for that. No, Amit, you found a podcast recently that you really like or you find useful that you were telling me about.
Was it How I Raised This? Is that the
I
one?
think so. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just as a founder that's thinking about
Yeah.
fundraising, right? Like I think they do a really good job of it's kind of like How I Built This. Everyone knows How I Built This, right? So this is a spin on that, which is How I Raised This. I was actually admiring it because they're a company that has put out a podcast that I am actually studying, right? So like that means that they're putting out really important content. If it's like for them, it's an advertisement, but for me, it's like actually genuinely like useful information. So that's the one.
Great. So Colleen, kind of final question, where can listeners learn more about you? Like what's the best way for people to connect with you and explore your coaching services?
Thanks for asking. Yeah, of course, our website, ignitepotential.com. You could always find me on LinkedIn. We have a company page, but also, people are welcome to find me and read about things that I'm up to on LinkedIn. And we have a social media sphere, Facebook, Insta, and those are some good places as well. But on our website, I have a book that I wrote that's a career journal. I have a career course that is a way someone can walk themselves through the process that I created to help people, get from where they are to a new career that's completely engaging to them from the very beginning, learning about who they are, visioning, finding their North Star, and then very practically figuring out how to make that pivot. And so that's all on our website. And we have a great blog as well. But on our website, myself and all the coaches have a complimentary session we offer. So we're happy to chat with people and see if it's a good fit.
Terrific. Well,
Yeah,
Colleen,
thank
this
you.
has been an absolute blast. I've written down a couple book recommendations. and things I'm going to go do right after this session. So feel free to text me and kind of hold me accountable. Look forward to that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's my
But yeah.
pleasure. It's always great to connect with you too.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. All right, great. So to get AI coaching from Dr. Campbell on these topics and others, please visit SelfActualize.ai, and you could sign up for your virtual Dr. Colleen Campbell to get coaching from her, and you could sign up for free. So thanks for tuning in, and we will see all of you next time on the SelfActualize Podcast. All right? Have a good evening, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
That's it for today's episode of the SelfActualize Podcast. I hope you found Dr. Colleen Campbell's insights on self-discovery thought-provoking and inspiring. If you'd like to dive deeper and experience AI coaching from Dr. Campbell and other world-class coaches, visit selfactualize.ai. There, you can explore personalized coaching programs designed to help you reach your highest potential. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on the SelfActualize Podcast.